Welcome back to Classic Stories and Fairy Tales. I'm your host and narrator, Jerry Coble, and we continue in the book The Life and Adventures of Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Today we read Chapter 5, Builds a House, the Journal. September 30th, 1659. I, poor miserable Robinson Crusoe, being shipwrecked during a dreadful storm in the offing, came on shore on this dismal, unfortunate island, which I called the Island of Despair, all the rest of the ship's company being drowned, and myself almost dead. All the rest of the day I spent in afflicting myself at the dismal circumstances I was brought to. I had neither food, house, clothes, weapon, nor place to fly to, and, in despair of any relief, saw nothing but death before me, either that I should be devoured by wild beasts, murdered by savages, or starved to death for want of food. At the approach of night I slept in a tree, for fear of wild creatures, but slept soundly, though it rained all night. October 1st. In the morning I saw, to my great surprise, the ship had floated with the high tide, and was driven on shore again much nearer the island, which, as it was some comfort on one hand, for seeing her set upright and not broken to pieces, I hoped, if the wind abated, I might get on board, and get some food and necessaries out of her for my relief. So, on the other hand, it renewed my grief at the loss of my comrades, who, I imagined, if we had all stayed on board, might have saved the ship, or, at least, that they would not have been all drowned as they were, and that, had the men been saved, we might perhaps have built us a boat out of the ruins of the ship to have carried us to some other part of the world. I spent great part of this day in perplexing myself on these things, but at length, seeing the ship almost dry, I went upon the sand as near as I could, and then swam on board. This day also it continued raining, though with no wind at all. From the 1st of October to the 24th. All these days entirely spent in many several voyages to get all I could out of the ship, which I brought on shore every tide of flood upon rafts. Much rain also in the days, though with some intervals of fair weather, but it seems this was the rainy season. October 20th. I overset my raft and all the goods I had got upon it, but, being in shoal water, and the things being chiefly heavy, I recovered many of them when the tide was out. October 25th. It rained all night and all day, with some gust of wind, during which time the ship broke in pieces, the wind blowing a little harder than before, and was no more to be seen, except the wreck of her, and that only at low water. I spent this day in covering and securing the goods which I had saved, that the rain might not spoil them. October 26th. I walked about the shore almost all day to find a place to fix my habitation, greatly concerned to secure myself from any attack in the night, either from wild beasts or men. Towards night, I fixed upon a proper place, under a rock, and marked out a semicircle for my encampment, which I resolved to strengthen with a work, wall, or fortification made of double piles, lined within the cables and without with turf. From the 26th to the 30th. I worked very hard in carrying all my goods to my new habitation, though some part of the time it rained exceedingly hard. The 31st. In the morning, I went out into the island with my gun to seek for some food and discover the country, when I killed a sheep-goat, and her kid followed me home, which I afterwards killed also, because it would not feed. November 1st. I set up my tent under a rock, and lay there for the first night, making it as large as I could, with stakes driven in to swing my hammock upon. November 2nd. I set up all my chest and boards, and the pieces of timber which made my rafts, and with them formed a fence round me, a little within the place I had marked out for my fortification. November 3rd. I went out with my gun and killed 2 fowls like ducks, which were very good food. In the afternoon, went to work to make me a table. November 4th. This morning I began to order my times of work, of going out with my gun, time of sleep, and time of diversion. Every morning I walked out with my gun for 2 or 3 hours, if it did not rain, then employed myself to work till about 11 o'clock, then eat what I had to live on, and from 12 to 2 I lay down to sleep, the weather being excessively hot, and then in the evening to work again. The working part of this day and of the next were wholly employed in making my table, for I was yet but a very sorry workman, though time and necessity made me a complete natural mechanic soon after, as I believed they would do anyone else. November 5th. This day went abroad with my gun and my dog, and killed a wild cat, her skin pretty soft, but her flesh good for nothing. Every creature that I killed, I took of the skins and preserved them. Coming back by the seashore, I saw many sorts of sea fowls, which I did not understand, but was surprised and almost frightened with 2 or 3 seals, which, while I was gazing at, not well knowing what they were, got into the sea and escaped me for that time. November 6th. After my morning walk, I went to work with my table again and finished it, though not to my liking, nor was it long before I learned to mend it. November 7th. Now it began to be settled fair weather, the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and part of the 12th, for the 11th was Sunday. I took wholly up to make me a chair, and with much ado brought it to a tolerable shape, but never to please me, and even in the making I pulled it in pieces several times. Note: I soon neglected my keeping Sundays, for, omitting my mark on them on my post, I forgot which was which. November 13th. This day it rained, which refreshed me exceedingly and cooled the earth, but it was accompanied with terrible thunder and lightning, which frightened me dreadfully for fear of my powder. As soon as it was over, I resolved to separate my stock of powder into as many little parcels as possible, that it might not be in danger. November 14th, 15th, 16th. These days I spent in making little square chests or boxes, which might hold about 1 pound or 2 pounds at most of powder, and so, putting the powder in, I stowed it in places as secure and remote from one another as possible. On one of these 3 days I killed a large bird that was good to eat, but I knew not what to call it. November 17th. This day I began to dig behind my tent into the rock to make room for my further conveniency. Note: 3 things I wanted exceedingly for this work: a pickaxe, a shovel, and a wheelbarrow or basket. So I desisted from my work and began to consider how to supply that want and make me some tools. As for the pickaxe, I made use of the iron crows, which were proper enough, though heavy. But the next thing was a shovel or spade. This was so absolutely necessary that, indeed, I could do nothing effectually without it, but what kind of one to make I knew not. November 18th. The next day, in searching the woods, I found a tree of that wood, or like it, which in the Brazils they called the iron tree, for its exceeding hardness. Of this, with great labor and almost spoiling my axe, I cut a piece and brought it home too, with difficulty enough, for it was exceeding heavy. The excessive hardness of the wood and my having no other way made me a long while upon this machine, for I worked it effectually by little and little into the form of a shovel or spade, the handle exactly shaped like ours in England, only that the board part having no iron shod upon it at the bottom. It would not last me so long. However, it served well enough for the use which I had occasion to put it to, but never was a shovel, I believe, made after that fashion or so long in making. I was still deficient, for I wanted a basket or a wheelbarrow. A basket I could not make by any means, having no such things as twigs that would bend to make wicker ware, at least none yet found out. And as to the wheelbarrow, I fancied I could make all but the wheel, but that I had no notion of, neither did I know how to go about it. Besides, I had no possible way to make the iron gudgeons for the spindle or axis of the wheel to run in, so I gave it over, and so, for carrying away the earth which I dug out of the cave, I made a thing like a hod, which the laborers carry mortar in when they serve the bricklayers. This was not so difficult to me as the making the shovel, and yet this and the shovel, and the attempt which I made in vain to make a wheelbarrow, took me up no less than 4 days. I mean always expecting my morning walk with my gun, which I seldom failed, and very seldom failed also bringing home something fit to eat. November 23rd. My other work having now stood still because of my making these tools, when they were finished I went on, and working every day, as my strength and time allowed, I spent 18 days entirely in widening and deepening my cave, that I might hold my goods commodiously. Note: during all this time I worked to make this room or cave spacious enough to accommodate me as a warehouse or magazine, a kitchen, a dining room, and a cellar. As for my lodging, I kept to the tent, except that sometimes in the wet season of the year it rained so hard that I could not keep myself dry, which caused me afterwards to cover all my place with my pail with long poles, in the form of rafters, leaning against the rocks, and load them with flags and large leaves of trees like a thatch. December 10th. I began now to think my cave or vault finished, when on a sudden, it seems I had made it too large. A great quantity of earth fell down from the top on one side, so much that, in short, it frightened me, and not without reason too, for if I had been under it, I had never wanted a grave digger. I had now a great deal of work to do over again, for I had the loose earth to carry out, and, which was of more importance, I had the ceiling to prop up, so that I might be sure no more would come down. December 11th. This day I went to work with it accordingly, and got 2 shores or posts pitched upright to the top, with 2 pieces of boards across over each post. This I finished the next day, and setting more posts up with boards in about a week more, I had the roof secured, and the posts, standing in rows, served me for partitions to part off the house. December 17th. From this day to the 20th, I placed shelves and knocked up nails on the post to hang everything up that could be hung up, and now I began to be in some order within doors. December 20th. Now I carried everything into the cave, and began to furnish my house, and set up some pieces of boards like a dresser, to order my victuals upon, but boards began to be very scarce with me. Also, I made me another table. December 24th. Much rain all night and all day, no stirring out. December 25th. Rain all day. December 26th. No rain, and the earth much cooler than before, and pleasanter. December 27th. Killed a young goat, and lamed another, so that I caught it and led it home in a string. When I had it at home, I bound and splintered up its leg, which was broke. N.B. I took such care of it that it lived, and the leg grew well and as strong as ever. But By my nursing it so long, it grew tame and fed